I'm Orestria. The winter 2021 anime season is finished, and that means it's time for my seasonal impressions. For those who are new here, I rank the shows that I watched in an approximate order of worst to best, and they're also in 3 different categories: nope, fine, and recommended. A show being in the fine section doesn't mean that I think it's bad. It's just not quite good enough to be recommended. I like to keep my recommendations slim and trim. Also note that ongoing shows like Attack on Titan or ReZero are usually not going to show up in my seasonal impressions because I'm usually behind on watching them. They're more likely to show up in the list series. Let's start. The nope category. The shows that I just couldn't. First is Kaifuku Jujutsu no Yarinaoshi, Rebirth of Healer or something like that. This one has a very interesting premise for a show. Basically, there's a healer and he gets abused his whole life, and then he gets the chance to turn the tables and actually rewinds his life to before it all happened so he can get revenge. Unfortunately, this cute image here is not a very good representation of what's going on in the show, because by revenge I mean rape. Next, X-Arm. Looking at images from this manga, it looks pretty cool. I didn't get far enough in to actually be able to relate to you the plot, but it's a bit old school with some really nice art. It's very sexualized, but I'm really not opposed to a sexy lady kicking ass. I like ladies too. I like Ghost in the Shell, and she's naked for half of that. Like, it's fine. But this show... This isn't CG compositing being bad. The CG itself is bad. They will literally have a CG character standing beside a 2D character talking to them. But really, the fights are the justification for the 3D, right? Because the 3D allows you to actually maneuver the people in the real world and have better fight scenes. Nah. Everything was just weightless and terrible. She looks like she's floating. In the first 3 minutes of the first episode, we had changed what time period we were in 3 times. I know there are people watching this to laugh at it, but I couldn't even stand to look at it anymore. It just hurts my eyes. Hortensia Saga. I will give it credit for being an actual fantasy show and not an isekai. It was a bad sign when I spent the cold open trying to figure out who I was supposed to cheer for. As far as I can tell, the only reason you know you're supposed to cheer for the good side is because they're wearing blue and they have a blonde-haired princess. Just the way the show was introducing information was really poorly done, and nothing stood out. And I read the plot synopsis. It's one of those stories where, like, the princess goes into hiding and disguises herself as a male to join, like, the males fighting to retake the kingdom. That plot synopsis sounds like the girl is the main character. But in the first, 15 minutes of the first episode, she hadn't done anything. She'd barely been on screen. The whole enjoyment of a plot like that is following that character and kind of watching her trials of, passing as a guy and proving herself to be a warrior and proving that, you don't have to be a guy to be a warrior. All the scenes in Mulan where she's doing the training with the guys and she's hiding who she is. The idea of a show being about a woman and yet not featuring the woman as a character is going to come up again on this list. Skate leading stars. I guess Yuri on Ice taught us that people like gay figure skaters. But what if having actual gay characters is way too bold and controversial for us? But Yuri on Ice made a lot of money off of merchandise. So let's have more pretty boys. And instead of making them explicitly gay, just make them as gay-coded as possible. Have them figure skate as rarely as possible. And figure skating, it's one guy on the ice at a time. How are we supposed to fujoshi bait with that? So instead, let's invent our own sport. Not really explain the rules that well. Welcome to Skate Leading Stars. I really liked this guy. I don't fucking remember his name. But his, very sarcastic, I'm gonna coach you character was actually a lot of fun. I think he was kind of the main reason I kept watching. But that's it. I'm a Fujoshi. And this is a Fujoshi baiting show. And there's no reason to watch it. I, the target audience, have no reason to watch this show. Not only is Yuri on Ice still there, I can just watch Yuri on Ice. Not only that, but there is a better Fujoshi baiting sports show this season that is a better show in every possible way. Kumo desu ka nani ka? I'm a spider, so what? Great name. It was. This is an isekai parody show. I think it's a parody. Where a whole class of kids get killed in a gas explosion, and they all get isekai'd. They're isekai'd into a fantasy world where video game logic actually exists, like you can actually gain levels, so that's a little weird. But the real kind of interesting differentiation point of the show is that they all get reincarnated into existing humans. So you can get reincarnated into this guy who is a lord and a big brother. And the younger sister is not one of the reincarnated humans. So you have all these memories of being her big brother and growing up together, but you also have your memories of your life back in Japan. That sounds kind of interesting, right? Good. Now imagine you spend 70% of the time with a girl who is reincarnated into a CG spider, living underground in a PS2 dungeon, eating CG frogs, and doing all the normal isekai tropes of like taking a bunch of poison damage to become immune to poison. We're told that in Japan, she was like the quiet girl, she was like being bullied, but then in this spider, suddenly she's this Genki protagonist girl who's like, I can do it! We will overcome! I'm entertaining! And it's like, this isn't who you were in your previous life. As far as I can tell, no one else's personality did a complete 180, so I don't know why this happened. Sokon Musume Senki. So, this is an isekai, but it's not your standard isekai, because the girl gets yeeted into a post-apocalyptic future Tokyo instead of a fantasy world. Humanity is under attack from the, whatever, robo-spiders. And the only way we can fight back is using girls wearing battle armor. And I want more Symphogear, so I watched way too much of this. The animation and art are really inconsistent, using 2D shots for close-up to try and go for like the moe cute girl thing, but then also using CGI for long shots and the action shots. And the compositing isn't there, and it's really distracting. What kept me watching was that there were some okay character moments, and there were some jokes that actually landed. I guess you could say I wanted to like this more than I actually did. I'm not even entirely sure what the disconnect is, because I've watched ugly shows before. I liked that they actually brought up some strategic tactics when they're fighting, and I liked some of the themes that were being explored. I don't know. I just couldn't get into it. Project Scarred! The plot of this is basically pretty boys gunfighting with magic tattoos, which I like. It also had a found family kind of theme starting to show, which is also a thing that I really like. But there were a lot of very distracting issues. The world building in particular. So the episode starts with a big narration block telling us that they live in this lawless district, and they live in the worst part of the lawless district, but they have no interest in actually depicting that on screen because it would detract from the pretty boys wearing pretty clothes, looking pretty, standing in pretty places. But the first episode, if you strip out the opening narration, you strip out the 7 extra unnecessary characters, the core of that episode was this vignette of our main character meeting this kind of legendary character, and it was actually really effective. It hit me emotionally. It made me cry. It made me want to watch the next episode despite all the problems. And then episode 2 bored me to tears within like 3 minutes. This is Vlad Love. Vlad Love is not a TV show. It is a work of art. This show is about a girl who's obsessed with donating blood despite having chimera blood that isn't viable for donation, and despite being in high school. Her scantily clad school nurse, whose name contains the kanji for blood twice, collects rare blood, and the main character's new vampire girlfriend, who needs to drink blood to live, but does not want to bite people. That plot is convenient but fine, but the rest of the show is just bizarre. And there are some truly weird choices in animation and presentation. But then after watching episode 1, I find out it's by Mamoru Oshii. I'm not the kind of person who remembers all the names of famous anime directors, but I know that one. That's the director of Ghost in the Shell. And Vlad Love lists him as the director, original creator, and series compositioner. This show is literally Mamoru Oshii doing whatever the fuck he wants because he can. The show is also a comedy, and usually I find comedies funnier the more I watched, but I actually found episode 1 of this a lot funnier than the rest of them. And then, to just try and get across how disjointed this show can be, in episode 3, the story stops. The camera scrolls up and shows a fighter jet, and there is a text crawl about the history of this jet. This show was hard to watch because my brain was churning. I could tell that I was missing a million references. I did get some. And I once again had that realization that this is a story about a female character, but in which that character is not important. They're not centralized. It's not their story. It's a story about them. Our main vampire girl, whose name I don't remember, who's on screen for a fraction of each episode, she has no agency. When these girls want to find out more about vampires, they don't even ask her. They just do tests on her and experiment on her. She never decides to do anything. She is a plot object that causes things to occur. Her personality literally changes when she drinks different blood. Ultimately, I want to watch a person who is extremely knowledgeable about the anime and film industry make an 1.5 hour long YouTube essay about this show. I don't want to watch the show. Kai Byoi Ramune. This is a show where a spirit doctor fixes mystery diseases caused by emotional issues. It's probably going to be pretty episodic, but the core was there in the first episode. I wasn't very interested in the main characters, and the attempts at comedy felt like something out of a 90s show, and that's a really big knock against an episodic show like this, where the main characters in the comedy are going to be kind of what keep you going along. And even the emotional storylines of the emotional issues that are causing the diseases and how they get fixed didn't really affect me very much. And I'm an easy mark. It's not hard to get me emotional. So that was just a lengthy way of saying I did not care. Ore dake hareru kakushi dungeon, or the secret dungeon that only I can enter. People wonder why I even bother watching the first episode of ecchi anime when I don't, as a rule, enjoy ecchi. The thing is, I also don't, as a rule, hate ecchi. I just wish that it was used intelligently. Because if you think about it, one thing an ecchi harem show is gonna have is a lot of female characters. So if you make those characters interesting, give them reasons and agency in being revealing or like lusting after the main character, and I will enjoy it. And I actually think the ecchi in this show was pretty good. I didn't love the character designs, but there was an actual rationale for it. The female participants were into it, which makes a huge difference. At this point, you've noticed we're still in the nope category. The ecchi wasn't what stopped me from liking this show. It was a lot of small problems, on top of ecchi not being my favorite genre, that made me lose interest. So, here are my main problems with this show. One of our main characters is a busty woman with no ability to move. She's touted as one of the best, if not the best adventurers in the world, but we don't get to see her do anything because she's trapped and she's in a cross pose with a revealing top. You can't see in this picture, she's fucking barefoot. And even with all her amazing powers and the amazing powers that she gives to our main characters, freeing her from this trap would kill her. 2. Creativity is supposed to be fundamental to our main character's success, as our lovely barefoot adventuress has given him the powers that made her an amazing adventurer, which include the ability to see and edit the fundamental rules of the world, which of course are RPG style even though this is a fantasy show, and create things from nothing. This is where the ecchi's purpose comes in, actually. A power like that would be incredibly broken, so when he is altering reality, he's actually using his life force, literally represented as life points, to use his abilities. And what does he do to get more life points? Well, he needs to do things that are enjoyable for him in life. Which means, when he kisses the girl he likes, he gains life points. So, here's a guy with unlimited reality warping, broken power levels. How does he use his amazing creativity powers? To make rocks.
I threw a rock at him. It was a big rock.
Welcome to the fine category, where at some point we'll start getting the shows that I've actually finished watching. First up we have Tatoeba Last Dungeon Maya no Mura no Shonen ga Joban no Machi de Kurasu Yona Monogatari. What if a kid from the last dungeon moved to the starter town? I think that's the English. So this is a fantasy and not an isekai, which again I generally consider as a bonus point. It still had a lot of RPG logic, like the idea of there being starter towns that are easier and a last dungeon, and the town near the last dungeon being a more difficult place to exist, so that was a bit weird. The reason isekais are so popular is it gives you a fish out of water character to introduce the audience to the world, and to get that effect here, our main character is basically a country bumpkin who doesn't know anything about the city he's now in, its politics, and that sort of thing. And then the comedy comes from the fact that he thinks he sucks. Because he was the weakest person in his hometown. But what he doesn't realize is that makes him incredibly overpowered compared to the average person in the world. So coming over to this starter town, he's actually the most powerful person in town by far, and doesn't know it. From the very start of the first episode, it's already evident that the character designs, timings, art direction, they're all good. The jokes were landing. And I can honestly say the first episode subverted my expectations. I was really into this at first. I loved the whole first arc. And then when the second arc started, it just stopped getting laughs. I no longer found it funny. I didn't have a big, oh, I hate this moment, anything. I can't point and say, this was the problem and this is why I stopped. But there were 2 episodes in a row where my feeling upon watching them was eh. And then the last of those 2 episodes, the end of it was setting up a mystery. And knowing the speed this show goes at, it was really obvious the mystery would be solved in the next episode. And I didn't want to watch the next episode. I didn't care enough to find out the answer to that mystery. So that's why I stopped. Mushoku Tensei Isekai ittara honki dasu. A hikikomori otaku dies saving someone's life and is reincarnated into another world. Oh, normal isekai. But everything about the presentation of this was not normal. He didn't seem like a high school kid. He seemed like an adult Hikikomori. He's reincarnated as a baby and maintaining his memories of his past life. This show has excellent quality in the animation, and the cold open was easily the best of the season. The twist of like being reborn as a baby and then growing up as a savant because you have the ability to read and understand speech from an impossibly young age, that was fun. And the way he was experimenting with the magic system was really, really interesting. And I think this show has a lot of potential, and it's probably a really good show for a lot of people. You can just tell by how well everything was presented that they really cared, they really thought about it, they really wanted it to be good. I had to stop watching because it grossed me the fuck out. Because this man in a baby's body is sexually attracted to his mother. And it was just way too weird and squicky to me. The show clearly thought it was hilarious, and I could not take it. If that sounds like a funny scenario to you, you should probably try this show, because everything about the show was well done and it had a ton of potential. I just could not get past that. Back Arrow. The first episode of this show is peak anime. This is what people who don't watch anime think all anime is. This is neither a put down nor particularly a compliment. Take a screen cap. Important to note, Back Arrow said in katakana sounds like Japanese for stupid person, bakayero! The main character adopts this as his name. He spends basically the first episode naked. This is a show which includes mecha battles and airships. It's definitely trying to be this light-hearted epic, and it has a lot of characters switching sides. It's got quality character animation, and it's written by the same guy who wrote Kill la Kill, which is one of my favorite shows. But I just kept losing interest. I wouldn't be surprised if someone comes and tells me to go back and watch it because the rest gets really good, but based on the lack of buzz I've heard and the 5.7 Mal rating, and I think Mal shows are usually overrated on Mal, I'm guessing that didn't happen. But I will always treasure the memory of a scene with a naked character saying, "I've got nothing to hide!" The Isekai Picnic. When I added this to my watch list, I did it based on the name and the poster, and it had a girls' love tag and the word picnic in it. What I did not realize was Urasekai means like otherworld or upside down world. I swear this is not the poster I looked at the first time, because I did not notice this gun. In this show, Japanese web creepypasta are actually real, and they're stories of people who had an encounter with the other side. There are gateways you can use to go to the other world, which is like a barren world, complete with creatures that can drive you mad. And I watched the whole thing! We've reached that point in the list, at least. My biggest problem with this show is that the girls have really obvious plot armor, and while they find themselves in interesting situations, the situation was always solved by the exact same method. The strength of this show is the Japanese urban legends and creepypasta themselves, and I multiple times found myself researching a legend from the show to find out more about it. The CG and CG blending in this show is pretty bad, which we've seen in a lot of shows this season, where if they're walking at a distance, then it will be CG, but then when we're in on the characters' faces, it'll be 2D again. But it's, it's fine. This series is tagged on my anime list as a shoujo ai, but this did not happen in the anime. The anime comes from some novels, so it could be that this does actually develop further in the light novels, but nothing happened in the show. The show also has an overarching mystery, and In the end, they didn't even try to conclude the mystery or progress the mystery much at all. I would only watch a season 2 if they got an upgrade to better animation, or they followed through on the shoujo ai, and preferably both. Tenshi Souzo Designbu, or God's Design Team. This is a cute comedy show about the design team that God has outsourced animal creation to. I watched a few episodes, and I was having a really hard time deciding how I felt about the show. I would be excited to watch an episode, and thinking back on episodes I'd watched, I would feel really positive, but during the episodes themselves, I would feel really bored. But like, I'd feel bored, and then I'd hit the end of the episode, and I would think about what happened, and I was like, that was really funny and clever. And I tell you what, folks, I found the solution. This show desperately needs 1.25 speed. Once I started watching with increased speed, it was super enjoyable. I don't know why it was so slow before. Maybe it's meant more for children because it's like educational. Whatever. I really liked this show. It was funny. I did feel like I was learning new things about how some animals work. And a lot of these episodes end up having this like puzzle vibe where you're trying to figure out what animal they're gonna end up with at the end. I will say I found the last episode really disappointing. It's not like there was an overarching plot line to the show anyway, so there was nothing to conclude, but it just felt like a really weak episode, especially since the penultimate episode was my favorite episode of the entire season, and probably would have been a better ending to the season, and they should have just stopped there. That said, I will watch more if they make more. It was good. Jaku kara Tomozaki-kun. This was a fucking excellent first episode, and a good show all around. Not many seasons have multiple high school rom-coms that I was watching, but here I am. Our main character is brilliant at video games. In particular, definitely not Smash Brothers. But he feels like in the game of life, he's a low-tier character and there's no point in even trying. He discovers that his biggest rival in legally distinct from Smash Brothers game is actually a champion in real life. Popular, athletic, does well in school. And she decides to show him that the game of life is the best game by using video game rules and training to improve himself in the real life. It sounds like it could get real preachy, but I think it avoided that. And there were some good tips in there. There are awkward moments in the show, but it would be wrong if there weren't awkward moments because the whole point is that the main character is awkward and trying to learn to be better. It's not revolutionary. It's more of a high school drama or comedy with not so much romance, at least in this season. I do think I would watch a season 2. Kimono Jihen! There are some amazing things that I really love about this show. And then there are some really, really unfortunate, awkward things about this show that make it so I just can't give it my broadest level of recommendation. The main characters in this show are kids. And horrible things happen to them and around them. Horrible things have happened in their backstories. And they pull themselves through the tough times with determination and leaning on the strength of their friends. But the part where it's literal children just make it really awkward sometimes. I particularly enjoyed the main character, who is naive, but not in a painful way, and which is fully explained by his horrible upbringing, in which he was treated like a less than human animal, and maybe also by him being a half-ghoul. The half-ghoul thing makes him unkillable, which leads to amazing setups and fight scenes. The final fight of this season was so awesome. But it's just a roller coaster. If you had the same show, but the characters were like teenagers or young adults, I actually think that would improve it. Because I can just stomach horrible things happening to young adults better than it happening to children. I get that that would change their characters and personalities a lot, but oh man. And Wonder Egg priority, the last cut from my recommended category. This show is so close to awesome. A magical girl show taking on teenage girls' suicide as a major topic with brilliant, colorful art direction. People were watching the first episode of this thinking, holy shit, do we have a new Madoka? There's just something really off with the pacing, and in fact, they didn't manage to conclude their season in the season. The conclusion is coming in June with an OVA. And this is the kind of show where it's all building towards the conclusion and the reveal of all the mysteries, so not having an ending hurts it a lot. And even when this OVA comes out, I have no fucking idea how they're going to conclude it in one episode. It does not seem possible from where we are. Maybe they needed to cut a few more episodes in the middle to make room for stuff. There was a reveal in episode 11 that I think probably should have happened in like episode 7 or 8 to keep the pacing better. We needed the hard-hitting stuff to hit sooner because most of this show feels relatively lighthearted for a show that's very much about suicide. Without seeing the ending and seeing if they successfully pull it all together, I just can't recommend it. Maybe I'll drop a note in whichever seasonal impressions comes out after the OVA drops. IDK. Watch this space. And we've made it the recommended category. The 3 shows that I most heartily recommend from this season. One of which I've already talked about before. It's Dr. Stone! And it's still Dr. Stone. Season 2 brings us to the conclusion of the first arc. And a little teaser, a little soupçon for the next major arc. It was good. I think I liked season 1 a little bit better, but I'm really glad that with season 2 they went for 11 episodes. Instead of trying to do a standard 12 or 13 episode run, it felt like they were really committed to the pacing instead of trying to stretch things out for an episode goal, and I really respect that. Just like before, there were a lot of funny moments, a lot of cool moments, a lot of science, and a lot of feels. Season 3 has been announced, and I'm here for it. Hori to Miyamura is a high school romance show, and my bisexualness is showing because I love all the characters. Everyone is gorgeous, the art is gorgeous, the animation is gorgeous, the whole thing is wonderfully presented. This show and the next show are both examples of the same thing, actually. A show that doesn't have a revolutionary plot, but is supremely well executed. The first 3 or 4 episodes of Horimiya are high school rom-com distilled to perfection. That's not to say the rest of the show is bad. This is an adaptation of a very long-running manga with a large cast of main characters beyond the titular couple. And I think the anime bit off a little more than it could chew. It introduced us to everyone and gave the setup for their plot lines and didn't resolve any of them except for the main couple. In the middle of the season, there were a couple episodes where so many characters were coming in and out so quickly that there were times where I was confused about who I was even watching. But it's not as big a problem as it sounds like, because the show was so good at making me care about what was happening that it carried me through any of my moments of confusion. And these are good kids. They're not dumb. They get hormonal and upset, and like a minute later come back and say, sorry, I know that's not what you meant, I just got upset because, and talk it out. So there is none of that misunderstanding that would be cleared up if you talked for 2 seconds, drawn out over 3 episodes shit that you often get in rom-coms. And now, some nitpicks. What the fuck is up with Miyamura? Him having tattoos and piercings is a major part of his character, but by the end of the first 3 episodes, he basically doesn't wear his piercings anymore. And it's not like my confidence has grown so much I don't need them story arc or anything. It's just like the show stops caring about showing them, and I'm really mad about this. Also, Miyamura says that he did his piercing by himself with safety pins. Kids, do not fucking pierce your lip with a safety pin. Holy Christ. Also, I can believe that he pierced himself with safety pins, but who the fuck tattooed a giant tribal tattoo all over a teenager? In Japan. Japan is not known as a place that is friendly towards tattoos. Even today, a lot of places discriminate against them due to their long association with organized crime. And don't tell me he inked himself. What the fuck? Alright, nitpicks concluded. Great show. Skate, or Skate the Infinity. This is a skateboarding anime by Studio Bones. Just like Horimiya, this takes a well-trodden path, the sports anime, and distills it down to perfection, fills it with heart and amazing animation. Welcome to Sakuga Central. If you wrote down a list of the plot points of what happens in this show, it would seem so trite. Like, you have seen it a million times before, but my god, the execution. Our main character, Reki, is a Japanese kid who loves skateboarding, works at a skateboarding store, makes his own skateboards, and heads out at night to watch and participate in illegal skateboard races. He meets the new kid in class, a half-Japanese, half-Canadian boy, with the very Canadian name of Langa. They become instant fast friends, and Reki introduces his new friend to his hobby. And Langa, while not having skateboarded before, has been snowboarding for about as long as he can walk. Okay, so here's an example of what I was saying before about plot point versus presentation. If you have a passing familiarity with sports anime, you can already tell that Langa is going to become a skateboarding prodigy. Did I say it right this time? I'm sorry. But how is this achieved? Well, he steps into one of the races, duct tapes his feet to a skateboard, and does insane snowboarding jumps. And it looks like this. When I watch this show, I clap, I cheer, I laugh, I stand up, I cackle, I cry. Sometimes in anime, you get a foreigner character and it's not thought out. They're just there to give them some exoticism or to explain them having blonde hair. Langa is thought out as a character. They connect his Canadian politeness to Japanese politeness. He speaks excellent Japanese because he is half Japanese, but he can also correct or explain English things to his friends. Now, the main villain is flamboyant and extremely queer-coded, to the point of basically talking about marrying Langa. And it's not a great trope, but it really didn't bug me that much, because normally when you have that, characters react to it. Like, there's usually this element of gay panic, like the gayness is part of the evilness or the corruption of the villain. But in this show, Langa doesn't care. He doesn't have any gay panic. He doesn't even have any reaction to it, because of course not, because gay marriage has been legal in Canada for decades. His problem with the villain has nothing to do with that. It's just with the aggressive way that the man skates. The skateboarding in this show is vibrant and excellently animated and exciting. It's not really the core of the show. The core of the show is definitely the friendship between Reki and Langa. Friendship. It also keeps up a quick pace, blowing through expected moments of a sports anime if they're not deemed interesting enough. Even the damn mid-rolls are cute and funny. And now, best girl and best boy of the season. You know, there's actually pretty slim pickings for best girl. With Wonder Egg being unfinished, I'm not really prepared to choose one of those girls as my top. Hori is definitely my favorite of the girls from Horimiya. Probably because the rest of them all have unfinished arcs in the anime. But some of the things she makes Miyamura do are a little bit weird. In the end, my two main contenders are Kon from Kimono Jihen and Kin-chan from God's Design Group. Kon is so adorable. She pairs so well with Kabane, and their interactions are just amazing. But I have to give it to Kin-chan, who is either trans or non-binary. Japan has its own long history and culture of non-binary expression, so I'm not sure the best way to explain her. I mean, trans and non-binary are these Western terms, and I feel like I would be applying them to her, and I'm not sure if it would reflect how she feels or how the creators intend her to feel. I do know that she goes to the women's onsen in the show, so I'm definitely going with she. I love her presentation. She loves beauty, both in the animals she creates, with birds being her specialty, and in herself with an ever-changing, fabulous wardrobe. But she's just as ready to get down to work as all the other characters in the show, and she'll help out her coworkers. She's very defensive of her birds and plotting ways to keep them safe. To me, she stands out the most of all the designers, even over the creepy girl, I think she was Pluto, who, yes, I also love. Meanwhile, over on Best Boy, there is so much competition this season. The boys showed out. There's Miyamura, who is just adorably sweet. He's been fully adopted by his girlfriend's family, and probably could have won if he'd kept his piercings and his long hair. Shut up! I'm allowed to be shallow sometimes. Reki and Langa are both amazing, and as a couple, they are the champions. But I literally can't choose one and not the other, because they really bring out the best in each other. They work so well as a pairing. The boys of Kimono Jihen are also really fleshed out interesting characters, particularly Kabane, who manages to be emotionally dead but really care about people and treasuring his promises while lacking all forms of social grace. Like, I actually took a week off from writing the script because I could not choose a best boy. And then someone crept into my thoughts who wasn't even in my initial brainstorm list. It's Tsukasa! Yes, the villain of the first 2 seasons of Dr. Stone. I am very spoiler limited in what I can say, but what we have here is a very fleshed out antagonist with motivations you can understand whether or not you agree. He can defeat a lion barehanded, but still keep up with Senku's genius, because it's not just a simple brains versus brawn thing, but an honest battle of wits and will as well. Season 2 had me bawling for Tsukasa, and I know it's easy to make me cry, but making me cry for the antagonist? Like, Skate didn't do that. And there you have it. That's all the shows I watched last season. Spring season has at least one show that I'm, like, omega stoked and excited about. If you want to see my first impressions of shows, you can follow me at twitter.com/Orestria. I have a thread for spring 2021 anime shows. I have the list video coming. I started editing it, and then I stopped editing it so I could work on this video, because this video is a little more time sensitive. But it's coming. Bye. But they don't actually want to represent it in the show because they don't want it to get in the way of having pretty boys wearing pretty clothes, looking pretty, standing in pretty places. That would have been a really good take if I hadn't hit the table with my knee. And now, best girl and best girl. Best girl. Best girl.